So to kick off, we've got a presentation from Yorkshire Procurement and then feeding into Barnsley Council, who use Yorkshire Procurement and have their own framework for delivering DFGs. So I'll hand over to Vicky and Andy first to talk us through Yorkshire and the YPO framework and the dynamic procurement system that goes with it.
Hi, I'm Andy Perrins. I'm a category manager at YPO based in Yorkshire. I host the category for health and social care. So we look after procurement and various other things that local authorities and housing associations and not-for-profit organisations can use. I'm joined today by Vicky and some colleagues at Barnsley Council, and we're here to share some information about two solutions that could be helpful to support the type of work that you do. And we'd like to thank Paul for allowing us a slot on this brilliant webinar. So we're going to talk about today stairlifts and internal fit out and maintenance and the DPS associated with that. Okay, just a little bit of background about YPO. We've been around about 40 years. We're owned by 13 local authorities up in the Yorkshire area, but we sell products and services across the public sector. And it really allows you to access all sorts of things procurement compliantly. So if you've ever had to work with procurement teams, you'll know that they're quite keen on making sure that you're compliant. What our solutions do is they allow you to be compliant. So come to us and we will support you through that process and offer you good value for money, all being well. Okay, so YPO has had a stairlift framework for a number of years. And I just wanted to let you know really that we've launched our latest framework. It's been a lot of time and effort to go into this, a big detailed tender process. And we worked with a lot of stairlift and lift suppliers to make sure, and customers that we have, to make sure that this framework is fit for purpose and attractive to both the market in terms of the stairlift and step-lift market and yourselves as potential customers. It's very difficult for me to judge from this quite who the audience is, so I'm hoping some of this makes sense. Please tap in the comment if it doesn't. So we've developed a specification which should be familiar to all of you. It sets out the general requirements that we have on suppliers of those stairlifts to meet in terms of the customers that they work with you being customers. So if you're in the business of enabling stairlifts to be put into people's homes to enable them to stay at home for much longer, this is somewhere where you can come to or direct your procurement team to really use a list of robust suppliers and without the need to advertise openly through a big long-winded tender process. And that's why people come to YPO. It reduces the time scales to go through those complex processes. So the specification is really robust. It's been developed with the market and customers, and we're using a similar one to last time, so we know it's fit for purpose. And as you can see, the stairlift framework covers everything that you'll need to do with stairlifts. We recognise it's a complex business going out there and assessing people, so we've really put the providers through the mill to make sure they know what they're on about. Okay, it's a bit small, but we squeezed it in okay. So the stairlift framework is set out in lots, and that's a typical procurement way of doing things. If you're not familiar with procurement or not familiar quite what a lotting structure is, my advice would be if you're interested, would be to go to your procurement team and speak to them about these. But if you're familiar with how stairlifts work and the maintenance of stairlifts, then you'll recognise some of how this is structured. So essentially, we've got different suppliers who have chosen to go on different lots within this framework. And the market, as you may or may not know, is made up of a huge range of suppliers, from quite large ones to quite small ones. We've tried to attract as many as we possibly can onto this, recognising the need to buy local as well and to source locally where appropriate. And this also applies to where they choose to operate. Not all stairlift and providers, suppliers can operate within every part of the UK, but we've got it all covered in terms of the UK. From a procurement perspective, you can award against whichever lots you want, so one lot or multiple lots with multiple suppliers on different lots in any combination that you choose. So what we've done, we have been out to a formal tender process. We've asked a whole number of very detailed technical questions of the providers. These really cover how their understanding of the whole process, from working with you as a main customer to working with your end users, your service users, whatever the name in which you want to call them, and really testing their ability to do that. So their ability to scope what the stairlift requirement is, their ability to work with your OTs or other members of the team, their ability to work with vulnerable people. That's really important. How they clean up the environment when they've worked in a particular property. All these things we've tested through a whole series of very detailed questions, and we've evaluated those and scored those providers accordingly. We've also scored them on their net zero agenda and their social value agenda as well, because that is becoming quite high up on the agenda in terms of local authorities or housing associations and their procurement objectives and criteria. One thing we've also done with this is we've established some fixed prices for at least the first 12 months of the framework. So that means that you can, if you choose to, directly award to suppliers based on the prices that they've given to us against any of those lots and criteria. And we can share those prices with you. If you get in touch, we can talk to you about how that might work. And this is great, actually, because you know you're going to use a framework where you've got good, high quality suppliers and you've got some fixed prices. You can also, if you choose to, undertake a further competition, which means that you go out and advertise what you want against all the suppliers on that framework, and they come back to you with perhaps revised prices or perhaps something that will suit your needs better. Okay, so these are all the suppliers that we've got on the new framework. They cover the whole of the UK. There'll be some names in there that you'll recognise, maybe some that you don't. My advice to you would be to, I guess, if you're looking at stairlifts, looking at renewing a contract, something's coming to an end, this is an option that you've got, because if you've got a supplier that you like, perhaps whether that's Handicare or Prism or anyone like that, you can go to your procurement team and say, we'd like to carry on using this supplier. We've got a great relationship with them, and they can use this framework if they choose without having to go to a re-procurement, because we recognise actually that your relationships with some of these suppliers are really important to maintain. And most of the business that comes through this framework comes as a result of a direct award, as we call it, where you don't need to have a further competition. So I hope that makes sense to whoever's listening. Again, it's difficult to judge the audience, but if you've got any questions, we'll make sure that our details are available at the end, and it'll be me and my team that you speak to. So thanks for that. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Vicky and her information about the DPS along with Barnsley. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. So thank you to, and hello, welcome to everybody that's attending today. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name's Vicky Horsfield, and like Andy, I'm a category manager at YPO, and the category that I currently cover is facilities management within procurement services. So I manage a team of buyers who create and manage frameworks for facilities management services, and my team also expands to cover buildings and highways products and services too. So the agreement that I'm going to be highlighting today then is the Internal Fit Out and Maintenance DPS. DPS, as Paul did refer to at the beginning, is a dynamic purchasing system. So a dynamic purchasing system, or a DPS in short, is similar in ways to a standard framework agreement. However, it differs in that it is open for new providers to join at any time throughout its duration. Andy has just referred to on the Stairlift agreement though to a direct award and a further competition. With the DPS, only further competition is available. So this agreement covers the areas that are referred to as hard FM. It covers the services required for the upkeep of a building, so primarily the maintenance, servicing and adaptation aspects required inside of a building. The categories or lots that you may know them as have heard of them before, covered under this agreement are listed on this slide. So you can call off from this agreement for your requirements, for example, for painting and decorating, mechanical and electrical services and kitchen and bathroom installations, and all of the others listed on this slide. I won't read them all out. The specific category that we are here to discuss today is, of course, disability adaptations. So this category can be utilised as a compliant route for the provision of bathroom adaptations, improvement of access to rooms and facilities, level access showers, to widen doors and install ramps and other adaptation works. As I mentioned on the previous slide, one of the advantages of an agreement that is set up as a dynamic purchasing system is that new providers can apply to join the agreement at any time. So if a customer therefore has an incumbent or a local provider that they wish to have the opportunity to bid for their requirement, we can assist with the onboarding process. We guide that supplier on how to apply. This consists of the standard selection questionnaire that is mandated for use in pre-qualifying suppliers on public tenders. And as long as the supplier is successful with this application at that stage, they are then added onto the agreement and they're ready to bid once you are ready to issue your call off or your further competition. If the provider actually fails this application process, they can in fact reapply as many times as they like. One of our founding members and customers, Barnsley Council, have been calling off from this DPS agreement with their disabled facilities grant requirements now for over a year. And they have also been through the process with us of onboarding their local and incumbent providers. On the next slide, I will ask Jonathan a few questions so that you can see how they have found the process. So I just want to introduce Jonathan and thank you again for assisting us today. As you're aware, Jonathan, I just have a few questions, please, as it's always reassuring for attendees to hear from somebody that has done something before them. People do get that comfort from hearing about somebody else's experience. If you could just please give a little explanation of what you actually use this agreement for.
Yeah, so good afternoon, Jonathan Jenkinson, Project Manager at Barnsley Council Disabled Facilities Grants Team. So we've utilised this agreement, as Vicky says, over 12 months now. We competitively tender for complex projects that aren't covered under contractual agreement. For example, external groundworks, extensions, conversions, internal structural works.
And what was it that made you use this agreement in particular, Jonathan, please?
So we revisited our processes internally and externally. We're a little bit concerned in terms of auditable requirements and that we weren't fully compliant in terms of how we're procuring projects. So reasons for utilising that were it's a compliant route to market, full auditable process, a lot of time saving, so we didn't have to go through a few full procurement exercise ourselves, competitive advantage and pricing within the current market, and ultimately ease of use.
Thank you, Jonathan, that's great. And I know obviously within that you have mentioned the benefits. Obviously the next question is what are the benefits? Are there any others or have they been covered in the previous question?
Yeah, pretty much very similar. So competitive pricing through mini competitions. So I think there's 25 suppliers on there at this moment in time. Every opportunity will go out on a further competition to them for approximately 3 weeks on a pricing exercise. Well, that's our specific requirements. Full auditable process. It removes any conflict of interest in terms of the pricing exercises. And then we've noticed visible improved contractual KPIs on the back of that as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you, Jonathan. So all in all, then it has made life easier then with what you're saying. Obviously, it's a shorter process. It's fair and transparent. Is that how you would summarise that?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think the main positives coming from it is the fact that a lot more local suppliers have been able to apply for it and be successful to get on that framework, or DPS, sorry.
That's fantastic, thank you. And do you know what the views are from from your local providers? Those that you approach, or those that are actually using it to bid for your requirements?
Yeah, so regularly liaise with a lot of local suppliers. They find it easy to use in terms of setup and process, an increase in terms of opportunities because they register themselves against every lot that they can complete works for. So they don't just receive opportunities for our works, it's further works as well. And then just on the back of what you've already said, opportunities are open-ended. So if somebody applies and they've not met the minimum criteria, they can resubmit and get back onto that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know yourself, Jonathan, sometimes it's not been plain sailing, has it? I mean, with the SMEs, it is a, procurement, public sector procurement, it can sometimes be daunting. So we do have to keep up that contact with the providers to assist them in what they do next. And obviously, if they have failed, what have they done wrong, and how can they do better next time to be successful in getting on there, which I know obviously you've been through that experience with us. So thank you very much. I'm sure that will have been helpful to the other attendees. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
So just to recap on the advantages of using the agreement, many are the same as Andy's discussed for the Stairlift agreement. So reduced timescales, as Jonathan has also mentioned. YPO have already undertaken the full procurement exercise to establish the agreement. So there is no need for customers to do this again. They just call off with their requirements for pricing. So ease of use, it's also very simple to use. Again, as Jonathan has also confirmed, the terms and conditions or call-off agreement has already been agreed with the providers, but also it has the flexibility to vary elements to ensure it meets the customer's needs. So as mentioned also, on a DPS, you would undertake a further competition. So pricing is only established at the customer call-off or further competition stage, as it's also known as. And again, as we've mentioned a couple of times, because this is the main advantage of a DPS type agreement, really. But providers are able to join at any time, and we can assist your providers, your local incumbents, your local providers or your incumbents with this process from start to finish and guide them along the way. And I think on the next slide, then please, that just leads us to the current list of providers that are on the category for disability adaptations. Obviously, with this being a DPS agreement, that list of suppliers is constantly growing. And I think that brings us to the end of our slides. Paul, I don't know if you were wanting to open up to questions or whether you're doing that at the end, or I'll hand it over to you.
Quite a lot to go through there, and I think so I guess kind of first of all for kind of Vicky and Andy, in terms of who can sign up to YPO, is it whole of England? Can any local authority sign up?
Yeah, that's right. Any local authority, NHS organisation, charity, housing association, anyone can use this as long as they're not for profit. That tends to be the way it works. On our website, if you look at our website, you'll see YPO permissible users. You can search to see if you are a permissible user, but generally speaking, it's the whole of the public sector, including housing associations. Is that right, Vicky?
Yep, I totally agree with that, Andy. So any public sector organisation or any organisation that has to comply with the public contract regulations, and that's across the UK, yes.
Great. And is it kind of relatively straightforward process to sign up?
I'd say so, yes. I mean, I think the beauty of us at YPO is, if anybody can just pick up the phone, even if they don't know anything about public sector procurement, anything about procurement itself at all, or public sector buy-in, contracts, anything like that, they can just pick up the phone and we will guide them from start to finish. We've got user guides, we have also further competition templates, lots of templates, example pricing schedules, all that kind of thing, just everything that we can do to assist the customer, really.
Great.
If you want to add anything there, Andy?
No, I think part of what we do at YPO is we have very, very good customer service in terms of our connections, recognising it's not always easy to understand what procurement's all about. So our role is really to hold people's hands, so to speak, through what can be quite a daunting process. So all I'd say is just get in touch, and we'll,
Yes.
As daft as any question may sound, we've heard them all, I can assure you.
Okay. And kind of as we've discussed in the past, Andy, the kind of DFG in terms of procurement is a little bit different to kind of the standard things where a council's buying something. It's a council giving kind of citizen or resident the money to buy it, but that's kind of doesn't cause you any problems in terms of the setup of the kind of framework or the DPS.
It absolutely doesn't. I think the way that councils have treated the DFG grant, some will treat it as a grant to the user, which it is actually, but they still deem it to need to be spent in accordance with some of the regulations. So I can't get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah.
Suffices to say that many councils will use our Stairlift framework for the purposes of DFG provision, because they've chosen to treat the grant in a way which means that they need to do that.
Great. And I think you mentioned that there was kind of a range of I suppose kind of other elements of it in terms kind of removal, recycling, warranties. So in terms of warranties, can you have kind of quite a long-term warranty as part of the purchase?
Yeah, with the Stairlift framework, each new installation will come with a 2-year warranty as standard. We built that in, and the price includes that. And then that's extendable for up to 10 years.
Okay.
So if you have a long contract or you want to manage things in a different way, you can buy additional warranties with that provider supplier for up to 10 years. So I think one of the beauties is that everything comes with a 2-year warranty.
So in terms of, you kind of covered this already. So we've got frameworks and we've got DPSs. So I think probably the two main differences, as I understand it, is that a framework, you have all the contractors on at the start, and a DPS, you can add contractors as you go. With a framework, all the prices are set at the start, although they can increase, and you can award directly to somebody off the framework. But with the DPS, you get prices in every time you want to award a contract. Is that right in terms of the differences between the kind of main differences between the two, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want a job at YPO?
Thanks. I'm glad I've understood it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. Absolutely. Go on.
Sorry, I just wanted to say both options usually available with a framework, aren't they? I think Paul just mentioned the direct award there. So yeah, you can more often than not. Well, it depends how it's set up, doesn't it? But you can more often than not do a further competition as well on a framework.
Yes, but you can't do a direct award on a DPS.
No, because suppliers are joining at every step of the all through the duration of the agreement. It would be unfair. Well, it'd be impossible basically to re-establish pricing. Every time somebody joined the agreement. So
with the framework, you've got perhaps kind of 3 or 4 per lot, maybe possibly more. And yes, as a local authority, you could pick whichever one is the most appropriate, or you could get quotes off them. And so you could either choose to get prices, or you could award directly to just one without getting quotes from the others.
Correct. Yeah. If those prices are within your most economically advantageous standing orders requirements within your local authority. So my advice would be, let's say you're using Prism at the moment, and you wish to continue to use Prism at the end of an existing contract period. A few months before that happens, I'd advise to go to your procurement team and say, contract's coming to an end, we want to use Prism. They can go away, get the information from us and discuss it with you around the current prices, things like that, to make sure that you comply with your own internal procurement requirements.
Yeah,
we're just enabling that to happen, but every customer has to meet their own internal requirements.
Great. And in terms of kind of the upfront bits, kind of whether you did a direct award or whether you had a kind of further competition with the framework. I presume somebody from the lift manufacturer or supplier would still go out, do the survey, visit the person, make sure it was all as it should be. That's kind of part of that process.
Absolutely. What tends to happen is local authorities tend to award to one or two or several suppliers, providers, depending on what they want, for a period of time. So the supplier, the provider doesn't have to go out each time to do a quote per se, but they would. So if an OT or someone recommended that someone needed an install, that provider would go out there, they do an evaluation of the works, they come back, they'd make any recommendations as they normally would around any changes or other requirements. But the actual cost of the lift installation or whatever it might be, that's an agreed price. Anything more than that, they would always discuss back with the customer, as in the local authority. But that's how it tends to work.
Okay.
So they might have a 3 or 4 year contract or a couple of year contract normally with whoever they feel appropriate.
Yeah. In terms of both the framework and the DPS, was there a kind of social value element of it in terms of the original procurement?
Yeah, certainly in terms of the Stairlift one, we asked a number of questions around social value. Obviously, that's high on the agenda. And getting more and more prevalent within our customer base. So we asked some questions around suppliers and providers' understanding of what that meant. Again, it's quite a new thing. So most suppliers spoke about their local donations, some of the work they do with local schools, apprenticeships, things like that, as part of their social value offer. But what we're tending to see now are customers actually building in some elements of what they want from their providers in terms of their local social value. So if they have a contract with one of the providers, they might say part of this agreement could be to, I don't know, buy from a local area or have any subcontractors from a local area or something like that, which could support some of that agenda.
Okay. In terms of, I suppose, kind of local contractors, as I think you said, Andy, some of those names were ones that I suppose most people would know. So some of them are probably kind of more local ones. So in terms of the framework, are there some that only work in Yorkshire and others that work nationally? Is kind of a geographic element to it? Yes,
there is. And we've got that set out in the user guide as well. I didn't want to share all the details, but we've got all that information mapped out. Some, if you're familiar with the agenda, are very obviously nationals. Others, I think, will just work in the local area. I think Durham County Council, perhaps they'd be one that would work the Durham area more so than beyond that particular region.
And for the DPS, Vicky, I think kind of a lot of those contractors are kind of Yorkshire and Barnsley based, but any new contractors that local authorities wanted adding to the DPS could come from anywhere.
Yep, absolutely. So some of the providers are national, some of them, as I think somebody's picked up on, are Barnsley based. That's probably because we're doing a lot of work with Barnsley, so they've onboarded their local providers. Others will be local to a different area to which they are actually situated. So yeah, if a customer down south, for example, is wanting to use the agreement and wanting to onboard their local providers, then obviously you'd see more local providers appear on there, basically from down south, from that area as well. So yeah, absolutely, it's across the UK. So,
and then you kind of do all the checks on them, don't you, and kind of make sure that they're suitable to add to the list. And
absolutely.
And are there kind of annual checks after that you do kind of year on year, just to make sure that they're suitable to remain on the list?
We do, yes. So it's the standard selection questionnaire, like I say, that's mandated for public sector procurement initially for them to obtain the place on the agreement. And then we carry out our due diligence checks. So at a minimum, that would be financial stability and ensuring that all their insurance documentation and everything like that's up to date.
Great. Do any of the contracts on either the framework or the DPS, are any of the providers or installers DBS checked as part of that?
We wouldn't ask that in order for them to be able to, I'm just talking on behalf of the internal fit out DPS for the disability adaptations. We don't ask for that as part of the onboarding process because that's not required in every single setting. But we would encourage, for example, any education customers to include that within their, when they do their call off for the pricing, we would encourage them to put that in their specification, in their list of requirements, should I say, in that document at that point in time,
And for the Stairlift Framework, absolutely, it is included. So anyone that's having any contact with anyone must be DBS checked. We made quite a robust, look at how they worked with and supported vulnerable people in terms of their face-to-face contact from an engineer's perspective when in people's properties. Yeah,
great. So in terms of pricing, so with the DPS, they're priced on a case-by-case basis. So if there are any increases in materials, they would be reflected kind of case by case.
Yes. Just to expand on that, when the customer wants to do further competition, we would encourage the customer to ask the potential providers to complete a pricing schedule, and within that we would ask the customer to highlight what they expect, how long they expect the prices to remain fixed and firm, and say for example it's for a 3-year contract. If they want those prices to remain fixed and firm for 12 months, we would ask the customer to also state in there for the supplier to put forward how they intend to review those, what mechanisms they intend to use at the annual review base, for example.
And for the framework handies, do they kind of go up by kind of CPI or RPI, or is there a different?
We've asked suppliers to fix their prices for the direct award for 12 months. There is an opportunity at 12 months for them to change those prices. I think we would look at any reasonable reason for them doing that. At the moment, we're across YPO's whole supply base, we're seeing all sorts of challenges, as you'd well expect. So yes, there is an opportunity for that to change, and obviously if customers do a call off from the framework and it's a 2 or 3 year contract, there may well be price points built into that call off contract, and again customers can discuss that with those providers at the point of establishing the call off.
Okay, great. With the DPS, Vicky, is there any assistive technology included within that, or is it more kind of standard building works?
With something like that, what we would do, because the categories, the DPS, like Andy's Stairlift Framework, there's a set specification in there, where the DPS is extremely wide in scope, purposely really, so that we encourage the customer to come forward with their specification. So as long as we'd reach out to the providers, and as long as the providers were able to provide that, so to speak, then yes, it would be included because of how the agreement is set up and because it is so wide in scope, basically.
Great. One of the questions coming in quicker than I've asked them now. So I'll get onto you in a minute, Jonathan. But in terms of CDM regs, are they kind of in terms of either designer or contractor? How are they kind of factored into both the framework and the DPS?
Again, sorry, go on, Andy.
No, you go, Vicky. Sorry.
I was just going to say it's similar to the answer for the previous question. Really, that would be up to for the customer to determine what they require at the call off stage. So they put that into their set of requirements for the call off. Yeah.
Great. I'll give you both a little rest a minute because the questions are still coming in. So Jonathan, if you're still there, we had a kind of good conversation the other week about adaptations in Barnsley. So I think primarily you use the DPS for extensions, don't you? And kind of those kind of larger, kind of more, I suppose, kind of bespoke projects.
Yeah, that's right, Paul. So anything non-standard, as we probably categorise it. So extensions, more complex schemes, internal structural works, groundworks, external. Just noticed like a bit of a theme where current requirements from OTs a little bit substandard, and as you mentioned, bespoke. So it really does give that flexibility and opportunity that if you've not got something that would fit within a contractual agreement or current framework, you can extend that opportunity that bit further and send it out on a mini competition. And then you're gaining competitive advantage of reduced pricing and more improved contractual KPIs. So it works both ways.
So basically you get your contract documents together for say an extension, send it to all the contractors on the DPS, and then a proportion of them return a price to you within, was it within 10 days, 15 days?
Yeah, we work off a 3-week schedule, so 15 business days we allow, but that's just our requirements. If you wanted a 1-week turnaround, 2-week, or even 24, 48 hours, we have done a couple of those where they come through what's called a priority referral or priority request. So what we'll do is we had a 48 turnaround on one and received back some competitive pricing structures. And yeah, it's been excellent since we used it. Very active in terms of contractors submitting prices. And we've noticed that it is actually pushing down prices because people are obviously working against more contractors than they previously would have been.
Yeah. And I think kind of a lot of local authorities around the country are finding it really difficult to kind of retain existing contractors, let alone recruit new ones. So how are you finding the kind of the DPS is working for that for you?
We're working alongside DPS. We have our own level access shower framework as is. So I'll not go into too much detail. We've got 10 contractors on there.
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute.
Oh, that's fine, no problem. We're just building on the back of that. Some of contractors, when it goes back out for a re-tender, may not be successful, and they're very aware of that. But it does allow for that relationship to continue through potential different work streams. So it's working really, really well. Got a lot of our existing incumbent contractors on there, but we've also people who contact regularly and turn around and say, no, we ain't got an opportunity. Well, in actual fact, then there is. So signposting through and seeing a few new people getting onto that process as well. So it's good, very competitive market out there.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you've got a separate framework for showers, and I think you were telling me that your kind of overall spend on DFG has gone up from, was it 1.9 to 3.3 million? If I remember that correctly.
Very, very close. Yeah. So
Okay.
1.89 previous year spends.
Yeah.
And this previous financial year, we just for the first time hit our full budget allocation 3.37.
Yeah.
And the framework plus the DPS has really driven those visible improvements as well as a lot of hard work in background. So
I think, I mean, a lot of local authorities have struggled to spend their full budget in recent years. So it's kind of really good to see that yours has gone up and kind of book that trend. So can you just outline quickly your shower framework and how you've got that set up for us?
Yeah, so it's almost very, very similar to one that's from YPO. Frustratingly, I've done all legwork and groundwork and all the procurement documentation. But we've got a framework of contractors for level access shower installations. They created their own individual scheduler rates, and we work off a rotation. So next contractor down gets the next award. While some people may recognise that's not always the most competitive way in terms of your financial position, all contractors on that framework were very, very similar in terms of their pricing, but also what they could procure it for as well, or what they can buy the product for. So 10 contractors on the framework, work on rotation, give them 1 week pricing schedule, 4 weeks on site. We're seeing visible improvements and contractual KPI improvements there as well. Yeah,
I think kind of increasing your spend by what's that, kind of over 50%, isn't it? Is really impressive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other justification and reason in the background. Our working team, and we've been able to increase our resource. Somehow we've actually been able to appoint to technical officer positions, and I know that is a bit of a consistent theme where people are struggling at the minute. But yeah, a lot of upskilling, training, development, closely performance monitoring the team as well. But yeah, some excellent results.
Yeah, I think kind of, as you said, that they're kind of done in rotation, and it's not necessarily always that you get the absolutely the cheapest price. But if you're going out to tender for kind of 3 at a time, you wouldn't necessarily always get the absolutely cheapest price. I think it's kind of recognizing the pragmatism behind that, and that you've got a very kind of robust and loyal list of contractors that can get through this work really quickly. And in fact, it doesn't cost any more, but the way you've done it just means that you have got that robust contractor base that you need to do these things on an efficient and effective basis.
Yeah, correct. Exactly that. And ultimately, just with regards to the process, it almost gives that reassurance to the contractors that they will be getting the work stream. So not be submitting prices on a competitive tender, not being awarded any of the work.
Yeah.
So it certainly supports that process.
Yeah, so they don't have to worry and kind of go and get other work because they know they've got a steady stream of work with yourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you have any issues where something goes wrong and kind of through the DPS where either yourselves or what happens if a job goes wrong and there's kind of an issue with the contractor? Is that down for you to resolve or through the DPS, Vicky? How much involvement do you have if there is a problem? And you may not have had any problems, but what happens if something did go wrong?
Yep. So if that were to happen, as an organisation, so once a contract's been awarded, the awarded contract is between the successful provider and the customer themselves. However, as an organisation, we don't just step away. We're there continuously to offer guidance and support. So yeah, we do unfortunately have occasions where there might be an issue within a contract, something can't be agreed upon or something like that. We would of course step in then and speak to both provider and customer and try and offer our guidance and support. We can't actually offer any legal advice because we're not insured to do so, but we do provide as much guidance as we possibly can and advise customers in that case if it does go that far down the line to obtain their own independent legal advice. But yeah, we do try and assist as much as we can.
I think just let me add something to that. When Vicky means customer, she means the council as the customer or the housing association as the customer, not the end user.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's all right.
Okay. The customers.
Too many customers.
Paul, just to build on that and to give a bit of reassurance, we haven't had to utilise that opportunity.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jonathan.
In terms of, are there any kind of restrictions on contractors subcontracting the work?
It depends if they're listed as, so when a provider completes the pre-selection criteria when they're wanting to onboard onto the DPS, for example, they do have to declare whether they're going to be using any subcontractors. And if they intend to use what's classed as an essential subcontractor, so if they can't fulfill that part of the job, or if they can't fulfill the whole of their work without using a subcontractor, that subcontractor would also have to fill in the pre-qualification and be successful with that questionnaire also. Bit complex to go through in a couple of minutes chat, but obviously I could follow up on that at a later point. But yeah, they can subcontract, and again with regards to what checks they need to do and that kind of thing, it does depend whether that is an essential subcontractor or not.
Okay. So I'm not going to get through all of these questions, but I'll just do 3 last ones quickly before we have to move on to the other bits and pieces. So in terms of the kind of cost or the kind of payment against either the framework or the DPS, it's kind of the contractor that pays you, isn't it, directly once they've got the job?
Yes. Yeah. So in terms of the DPS, there's no charge to the customer. The person that's calling off on the contract. However, the provider does have to pay for the DPS, it's a 1% rebate amount payable on any spend that they've achieved through the agreement. So if the supplier is onboarded onto the agreement and they don't win any work whatsoever, there's never any charge to that provider. It is just on any work that they win through the agreement, and it's 1% on that particular spend for that calendar month, basically.
Great. Do you include modular ramps on any of the lots?
That could be included under the category of disability adaptations. It can extend to include that, yes.
So that would, I guess, potentially be one of the contractors. That could potentially be a subcontractor situation, I guess, in terms of again the ramps from a particular supplier.
It could, yeah, exactly, yeah. It depends what the requirement is, doesn't it, and what else is included in that
Yes.
particular requirement from the customer. Yeah.
And last one, so DPS, that has to be kind of an electronic tender, doesn't it? You can't do it kind of sending stuff out in the post. It has to be done electronically.
Yes, so it is done electronically. What we usually do is we would take the customer's requirement via email, and then we would put that forward onto our tendering portal in which our providers would then bid. I don't know if you're wanting to go into this now, but Jonathan Jenkinson and Barnsley actually use our agreement on their own portal. But yes, it is all electronic.
Great. So thank you all for that this afternoon. I don't think we've had so many questions on a presentation before, so and apologies that there's a couple I haven't got round to, but we will have to move on in a moment. But thank you to Vicky, Andy, and Jonathan for joining us this afternoon. I think that's been a really useful session. So thank you all. We'll share your contact details so that if anybody wants to get in touch, I'm sure they will do following this webinar. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, for any of the questions that weren't answered either, if Paul is going to share the contact details, please feel free to send us your questions directly. That's absolutely fine.
Great. Thank you all.